Hey you, no droids. Get out of here.
Thanks everybody for joining us. My name is Matt Rosu. I'm an economist at Susquehanna University and thrilled that Ben Smith is with us. He is an economist at the University of Nebraska at Omaha. Ben, thanks for being here today.
Well, thank you for inviting me. And yeah, this sounds like an interesting discussion.
Yeah, so Ben and I, along with not a former, I should say a Susquehanna alum, not a former Susquehanna student, Bailey Hackenberry, the three of us put together the Economics of Star Wars website. If you're interested in just watching a lot of Star Wars clips that teach economics, you could go there. But today, we are in the first video in a series on economic lessons from Star Wars. And we're going to actually examine a little bit of discrimination. We will go to the first clip now, and then we'll be back to discuss what we think about it in the economic lessons.
I need passage to the arts. No droids.
Where to? Interesting first clip from the Mandalorian. So, Ben, when you see that, I guess what's your thoughts on the economic lessons embedded within that clip?
Well, one of the things that I think is really interesting about The Mandalorian is that The Mandalorian is demonstrating with droids basically what happens with racism. And so what's happening in this clip is fascinating on two levels. The first is that because he's unwilling to accept droids, he's actually accepting a product or a service that is of lower quality than if you were to accept the droids. Moreover, the lower quality product or service costs him more.
Yeah.
So it is both more expensive to him and it's of lower quality. And this is exactly what happens when people are racist, when they think about like labor pools and things like that. So if you're someone who's running a business and you're frankly just a racist and you don't hire Black people, that means that what you're going to do is you're going to end up hiring people who are less qualified than you could have hired, because you're excluding an entire pool of people that were, available to you. So I think it's a really interesting way to think about that problem, because it is shown very comically in this case because it's about droids, but all the economics are essentially the same.
No, I completely agree. And when I was in graduate school, one of the economists who had the columns that I read a lot of was Gary Becker. And I think he was the one who coined the term, like, to have a taste for discrimination, and really started to create this literature on the economics of discrimination. But if you want to discriminate, you pay a cost. You literally pay a monetary cost, which if you do not like discrimination, this is one of the parts of markets that I actually really like, is that if somebody wants to discriminate, they actually are forced to pay a little bit of a cost. There's more about it that I actually also like on what markets do. The Star Wars series has several clips that kind of relate to this. Let's catch a second clip on this time involving R2D2 and discrimination.
Hey you, no droids. Get out of here.
Thank you, R2.
So a second case, right? No droids allowed in the particular establishment. Watching this one, it looks like, was R2 the customer in this one? I'm trying to remember back to the series.
Yeah, he's the customer, or it's the customer. I don't know how we refer to R2, but Yeah, in this case, this one's actually in some ways it's even simpler to grasp because there's a droid who wants to
Yep.
give you money and you're refusing the money.
Yeah.
So you as the establishment are losing out on this deal. So as you said, markets you make it so that if you are someone who has, if you will, a taste for discrimination, you're going to pay for it. And it shows up in lots of places. So it's a little interesting that how it's presented in the Star Wars
Yeah.
series.
Yeah, one of if you're owning a business, right, you have an incentive to serve all the customers who want to pay you. And that's if you were to choose to refuse to a certain subset of customers, right, that's you're simply costing yourself money. And I guess once again, as long as the hopefully all of our audience, there's the normative analysis of the what ought to be and the positive analysis of what is. If your normative views are like ours, that we don't want to see discrimination, this is a nice factor of markets. Let's actually check out a third clip going back to the Mandalorian.
Anyway, I started the repair on the fuel leak. I had a couple of setbacks I want to talk to you about. I didn't use any droids as requested, so it took me a lot longer than I expected. But I figured you were good for the money, since you have an extra mouth to feed.
Thank you.
Oh.
Just another example here of Mando expressing his discrimination against droids and how it actually ends up costing him here.
Yeah, and it not only ends up costing him here, it's also, you can think about it in terms of production in this case. So what the mechanic is expressing is that basically her best workers for the job were not being allowed to be used, and thus essentially it was being less effectively being fixed. Like it was taking them more time than it should have. You can think about it just in terms of that like marginal product of labor sort of equation. He's basically forcing that marginal product of labor down just because he refuses to use who is the best possible person or droid in this case to do the work. So his discrimination against droids it's fascinating how the writers of the series have made a point on how it is costing him in all of these various cases. I don't know if they're making a point or not, but as an economist, I find it amusing that it keeps happening over and over again.
It is really an interesting point that they highlight, and it's a great point, right? You hire the person usually with the most productive, who could increase your production the most or who could provide the greatest value. One part that I love to teach about markets and when I teach on discrimination is the idea that you could actually have somebody who's biased, who actually has a bias against people in a certain group. And I always just use red hair and green hair or something like that.
Right.
But if their ultimate motive is simply to earn profits, if you're at a starting state where there's somebody who would be at a lower cost. So let's say there was some discrimination that caused a lower price for a particular group. What you would expect is then any firm who would like to make money, who wants to maximize profits, would essentially try to exploit any sort of a gap by hiring the cheaper input. But what we know that happens of that, the economics, that's going to increase the demand for whatever group is in the initially lower paying group. Increasing the demand increases the price. And it should really happen until the prices become equalized.
Yeah.
It's an interesting equilibrium concept that if you have markets and it really is profits that are driving things, the differences in pay for the same productivity, in theory, should be gone. Now, do we think in reality it's 100% gone? Well, no. But, like the numbers we hear about the gaps, most of that gap is the factors. It's not the firms that are discriminating against. And it's one part what I do love. Another part reason I love markets is the results that it really helps to eradicate different pay for different groups because of the profit motive, those wages should be equalized. I think that's really, I'm very pro free market, and part of the reason is I think it does all of these cool things, and that's one of them.
Yeah.
Well, great. Well, thank you to everybody for watching. This is part of a series on economic lessons from Star Wars. Ben and I will be back for a few more videos, but until next time, thank you, everybody.